guess a question that I'm interested to hear a little bit more about, Emily, is what inspired you or brought you into this line of work in the first place? You've been doing it for 20 years, which is a significant an amount of time. And so what has been sort of that driving force behind it?
It's a great question, and some of you have heard this, so I'll keep it brief. But I was an organization development consultant at a big consulting firm, and I was supporting the part of the firm that worked with the Department of Defense. And the head guy called me in one day and said, "We have a problem, and you're the person who's going to have to fix it for us and figure out why it is that all these officers we're hiring out of the military are like they're just not cutting it; they're failing." And so I did a study, and lo and behold, now this is 20 years ago, so it wouldn't be news today, but it was news then, that it turns out leading in the military is really different than leading in the civilian environment. And there's a thing called culture, and it has an impact. And I coined the term, 20 years ago, military transition, because I realized it was a thing. And I then went on to write my master's thesis about it and validated my findings in a whole lot of defense contracting firms around the Beltway, and it was the same everywhere. And so once I realized what the issue was, it was this cultural divide. I was able to work towards a solution, which was probably the first ever military transition program. And it just made a massive difference. Like overnight, it made a huge difference. And someone asked me years later, like, why are you still doing this? Like, why do you? And I said, really, at the end of the day, it's to end needless suffering. I know that sounds dramatic, but I mean, if you spend any amount of time in the military, and even if you haven't really achieved rank, whatever it may be, you come out at the top of your game and you enter this crazy new world, and there isn't really a lot to help you figure it out. It's a real blow to confidence. It's a blow to your identity as a leader, which you get in the military. So it just, so it became really fun and exciting, and kind of like a mission for me to help these folks and to try to do it at scale. I can't believe that still, and that's why I did this book at ease and the course, the accelerated military transition course, because it's the problems are still there and they're not being solved at scale yet, all these years later.
What are you hoping that a veteran in transition gets out of this book? You've put all this time and energy into writing this book. You are interested in helping veterans at scale. What do you hope they walk away with? What do you hope that they gain from the book?
Well, it's funny because honestly, in the process, originally this was just going to be like a very surface level rewrite of the original book, field tested. But once I kind of got into it, I realized, no, needs to be a new book, a different book, and it needs to be more targeted towards the veteran, less targeted towards the civilian company who's employing the veteran, although it is meant for both. And you asked me at one point what we were trying to figure out the title, and you kind of said, I don't know if this is the right title, field tested too. And you just started really doing a great job coaching me. And I realized you asked me that question, what do you want the veteran to feel when he reads this book or she reads this book or sees it? And what came to my mind was I want them to feel relief, and that's where that's, 2 minutes later in our conversation, that's where at ease came from, because there just isn't, there aren't good solutions out there yet. And the military does a kind of cursory job of getting people officially separated from service, but they don't talk about the cultural divide. They don't talk about, what it's going to be like and what to expect and all of the things you're going to go through, because there's going to be a lot. And the civilian employers aren't really often set up to do that either. And the books that are out there are really just about how to write a resume and how to get a job. And military transition is not about a resume, and it's not about a job. It's about a fundamental transformation of who you are. I mean, and nobody kind of prepares you for that. And so that's what the book is. That's what the course is. It's my best effort to take all these 20 years of looking at this as a behavioral scientist, but also as a coach and working with veterans, working with companies to try to accelerate the learning curve for the veterans they hire. It's my best effort to coach people through this process.
And I'm curious, like, what have you found in terms of like response to this work? I mean, obviously there's this book and this book is fairly new, but you've been doing this work for a long time. And I'm curious what kind of reactions you get or what kind of feedback do you get from veterans or employers about the necessity of this type of work?
Unfortunately, the programs that exist today are really for officers or special forces. So there's not a lot, if anything, out there for just the average person. And so they have validated, all these folks that I know have validated for me that this is completely unique. There's nobody looking at the psychosocial aspects of the military transition, at least nobody who's publishing in a non-academic way. And so that's reassuring. But what's even more exciting and just mind-blowing to me is the emotional response. Because, you know, when you're writing a book like this, you have to have a lot of people looking at it and a lot of people reviewing it. And I had a lot of veterans involved in that. And, you know, what they came back with was just one person said, a Navy guy said, I now understand why I lost my first job. Like, I never understood all these years, 6 years ago, but you explained every mistake that I made. And so that was like, wow, okay. And he immediately got into the language of the book and started using the terminology back to me. And then other reviewers who read the book, everyone had a big emotional response. They said they felt seen. They realized that they weren't alone. Several people, like major, like people, like very senior, like military folks who you think of in the stereotypical way, like were reduced to tears, which just, of course, then I was reduced to tears and it was just a total shit show. But so it's incredible. I feel like it's happening. Like what I set out to do is happening. You know, I am first and foremost a coach. That is who I am to my core. I'm also a master certified coach, oh, by the way. And the fact that all the work and the time and the effort and the gifts that I've contributed to this are having this impact, just I can't even put words to it. It's just incredible.
What is the biggest piece of advice you'd give HR departments?
So the biggest piece of advice I would say is make a small investment of time in creating onboarding specific to veterans, because most new hires who are coming to you from other jobs, they know a lot more than a lot of things that you take for granted. But the veteran coming into a job like is lacking very basic information, like, you know, the value of their time, literally in dollars, what it means to be a professional and to be a peer and a colleague where rank isn't part of the conversation. And how to shine rather than kind of, you know, deferring as they do, you know, in the military, just because of the culture. So, you know, the good news about all the research and work that I've done, and with my various teams over the years, is that, you know, we kind of know what the major pitfalls are, and I talk about them in At Ease, and we know how to solve for them. So you HR department looking to, you know, accelerate the learning curve, the cultural learning curve of your veteran hires, just need to make a small investment. It doesn't have to be a big deal. We know what the solutions are. And start by giving your folks the book At Ease, and they'll, you know, that'll take you part of the way.
Many organizations have an ERG for veterans. Where are they missing the mark or what can they do better?
Yeah, an ERG, that stands for Employee Resource Group. And big companies tend to have these ERGs for different affinity groups, for women, for you know, African American, APAC, all those things. And a lot of companies have them for veterans or military, they would call it. And some of them are good, but there's a lot left on the table in terms of how the business can and should work with their ERG to mutually support the business and the success of the veterans who are hired. So for example, you know, I've always said that companies should activate their ERG to help them translate resumes, you know, because a military resume looks complete, is full of alphabet soup. It's very hard to make sense as a civilian of what you see on a military resume. And so the folks in the military ERG speak that language. Now they speak both languages to bring them on board to help screen and help, you know, with the acculturation process. And then, of course, as soon as you have a new hire from the military, get them connected with the ERG ASAP. In fact, one of the programs I developed for a big firm, we actually assign them a buddy before their day one. I talk about focusing on onboarding from day zero, which means day zero is the day they sign the offer letter. Day one is the day they start. And that time, which could be weeks, it could be months, that's an amazing opportunity to build a, you know, affiliation and to build good feelings towards this company that you've decided to join, is to line them up with a buddy and get their questions answered, have somebody who knows when they're coming on, when their first day is and is ready to greet them. I can't tell you how many times I've heard veterans say, I showed up for my new job. I was terrified. It was my first civilian job and nobody knew who I was or like where I was supposed to be. And it left a really, really lasting negative impression.
Well, and the next question that I have for you is, you know, how can we help you get the word out or get the book into the hands of more people?
Honestly, my moonshot is, you know, the Department of Defense realizes they need to be including this in their, what they call a transition program and like get this into people's hands. As you know, soon before they separate. So, you know, service members who are either on terminal leave, which means they're going to be separating soon, or who are within the window, you know, like provide this to them as a minimal resource. So that's one big hope I have. The other one is that all of the companies who are, you know, who were and are very enthusiastic about hiring veterans need to give this to their new hires or even their folks who aren't new hires, because it will enhance their value to the organization. One of the things that is really, really true about the military transition that I learned a long time ago is that there's some stages to it. It's not an event that happens. It's a life thing. It's a season in your life. And that season can go on and on, as veterans will tell you. But one of the early stages that is very characteristic for veterans is a big resistance, just a resistance to everything that's new, or resistance to everything that seems wrong and chaotic, and it isn't the way it was done in the military, and it doesn't make any sense, and just a lot of, and I can totally understand that. I mean, I think anybody on this call who thinks back to a time when they were new at something that they thought they were an expert in, right, can relate to that kind of like, wait a minute, I thought I knew what I was doing. And so, yeah, so helping them recognize and overcome that resistance is really, really, really helpful to the organization that hires them. In fact, this might be a good time for me to read
Yeah,
one of the, it's really short, everybody. So this is from the very beginning, and each chapter starts with a quote from one of the many, many, many veterans I've interviewed over the years of my research. And this one starts with saying, when you get out, in fact, this person might even be on the call. I don't know. Anyway, when you get out, it's kind of like a shock to the system. It took a long time to find my place, my niche. It was very tough after being in a job where you're the top guy and you know what you're doing and people seek you out as the expert for your opinions. So that is very typical of the experience that many, many have of transition, is they left a place where they knew everybody, everybody knew them, and they knew what they were doing, to a place where they don't even know who anyone is because nobody's wearing a uniform. So then the next paragraph says military transition, and this is important. This is one of my big things. Military transition is not about a resume. Let me repeat, military transition is not about a resume. It is fundamentally about personal transformation, which is why it's so compelling for me, because that is what I do in my life as a coach, as so many coaches on the call can relate to. It's all about transformation. Military transition is a term I coined 2 decades ago to describe the struggle to succeed in the civilian workplace after military service. It was never about resumes or interviews, but rather the deeply human and personal experience of a major life change that you didn't expect. It is about identity, culture, personal growth, humility, and resilience. In this way, military transition is similar to many life changes any one of us might face. However, the transition veterans make from military to civilian employment involves a unique set of challenges. And then I go on to say how it's different, and how it's unique.
In At Ease, you emphasize the importance of preparing service members for the emotional and psychological aspects of transition. How can military spouses and family members best support their loved ones during this process? Are there specific insights or strategies from the book that you think are particularly relevant for military families as they navigate this shift together?
This, I think, is going to be so incredibly helpful for spouses who basically are going to stand by and watch this whole thing unfolding. And it is a whole thing, as I'm sure you know, Nikki. One of the things that is a very common misconception among veterans is that this change, leaving military service and entering the civilian workplace, is going to be, quote, just another change of duty station. So as you know, veterans typically change, their job, their location, they move, every 3 years or so. And what I realized early on was that the military does a really good job of what I call controlling ambiguity. So a base in one part of the world might look very similar to a base in another part. Things operate, they limit the amount of ambiguity so that they can have continuity of operations, limited disruption. You may be in a totally different part of the world, but there's a lot around you that's familiar. It's like somebody recently described it to me as it's a little piece of America's right there. And so the military transition is not like that. It's not controlled ambiguity. It's just like total ambiguity, as it's been described to me. And so I can't tell you how many veterans have said to me, well, I'm not worried about it. It's going to be great. I'm used to change. I'm really good at change. I do it every 3 years. I'm like, oh, I don't want to burst that bubble because I'm sure you are really adaptable, and it's not. So anyway, so a spouse who knows that and who has insight into all of the things that the veteran is going to probably be faced with, including in many cases a real blow to their confidence, of just a feeling of disorientation, like who am I in this world where I don't have my uniform and all my, my stars and bars so people know, how important I am. There isn't any of that around me. And I all of a sudden have to prove myself. They are going to need a lot of support. In fact, in the course, the Accelerated Military Transition course, one of the things we say early on is to really make this course work, you have to identify, quote, your person. Your person is a primary source of support who you want to bring into this learning experience with you. So they know exactly what you're going through, what you're learning. They can practice using the tools with you. And more than anything, they can be with you as you walk through this journey.
Go ahead.
I didn't totally answer one of the questions you asked before, and I just want to do that real quick, which is you asked, how can you guys help me? How can people help me? I mean, ultimately, if you know a vet, if you love a vet, or someone who's going to be a vet who's separating, soon from service, or if you coach vets, or coach military, you've got to share this book. I mean, it's a very small price to pay to make a massive difference in someone's quality of life as they go through this major life change that they don't expect to be a major life change. That's part of it, is just the shock of it. And so I know that and so it's really I think it's gonna be like so many books, word of mouth. But the military is an incredible community, incredibly tight-knit community. And as the word gets out from credible sources, veterans who are, really being impacted in a positive way by it, as several already have that I talked about, I think, my goal is just get as many people to read it as possible because it's going to help them.
It also occurs to me that if you know a nonprofit that is supporting veterans, that would be a great connection to make as well.
A great point.
Outside of veterans and military families, who else would benefit from reading this book?
Absolutely. Any recruiter, any HR person in the private sector, or even in the government, who hires vets, has veterans working for them, has got to read this book, because this is where you get the insight. The goal of the book is to kind of lift the veil for both audiences, lift the veil for the veteran as to kind of what their future employers are likely thinking and what they're prepared for, and then to lift the veil for the employer as to what this transition is like that their folks are going to be going through. And I bet it will answer a lot of questions as they read it. So those are the two main audiences. Also, it's funny, when Field Tested came out, and even before that, when I first started doing this work, I thought that the HR community would embrace it, but it wasn't the HR community. It was the diversity community that they immediately saw, we got this is for us. And in fact, the very first conference I was invited to speak at was the SHRM Diversity Conference, and that was probably 15 years ago, maybe. But since then, I'd like to think, and I do think, that HR and recruiting has come along. But anybody who does headhunting, who does placement for military folks, definitely. So I just want to read a short paragraph. This is one that this is emotional for me. It's also emotional for some of the veterans who have read it. So I'll read it to you. And it's the conclusion. And it says, veterans and service members, your military transition is a significant life event that includes so much more than your resume. It is a hero's journey indeed. I want to close with a message of hope for anyone who is understandably feeling overwhelmed, discouraged, fearful, or uncertain. At the other end of this experience, you will have a transition story. Every veteran's got one. It may take a while to get to it, but you will have one. It will be highly inspirational and helpful to others. It will include highs and it will include lows, the challenges you overcame and the victories you achieved. You can't see it yet because you are living the story right now. When you experience a low, remember this: it is the lows and how you overcome them that will make your story helpful and inspiring to others. And that is really true.